Hello and welcome to Talk Lit Get Hit, a podcast where we read questionable books recommended to us by social media and talk shit about them.
We're Bridget, Erin and Laura, three friends who haven't mentally progressed since high school, where we bonded over a love of music and books, but mainly Twilight.
Brace yourself for a heady cocktail of somewhat highbrow and incredibly lowbrow ramblings about all the books the internet loves and our journey to figure out why.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend us your ears. We come to discuss a novel that has been hailed as a harrowing exploration of friendship and a genuinely breathtaking literary thriller. It is our first foray as a podcast into the world of dark academia and a story that speaks directly to our theatre kid hearts. This month we are reading If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Hello, hello. Happy September. Woo! Wow. What a thrill to be in September, you guys. I simply can't contain my joy.
It almost feels like it's August.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, funny.
Too spooky. 3 spooky, dare I say. How have you been?
Good, busy. I once again have left reading this book to the last minute, so was just finishing it. For those who aren't following the Instagram, I recently went to Japan and I took it with me on the plane but didn't read it. So I tried to be proactive and it failed miserably.
I'm just a nice little trip.
Yeah.
I did have a nice trip.
No, the book did.
Oh, I mean, it did. It didn't leave the bag, but it certainly went to new places.
It saw the world.
Yep. Traveled to new heights.
Oh, I feel like Oliver would really enjoy traveling to Japan.
Is that some early shade?
No.
Oliver would definitely be that person that's like, methinks.
Oliver's an anime guy. The guy that's like lurking in the manga section of the bookstore. Like, oh, do you also read Attack on Titan?
Me lady.
Tips Fedora.
Yeah, Fedora. What about you guys? How has your month been?
My month's been good. Nothing too remarkable. I can't really tell you what I've done. I read a few interesting books. I went to work every day.
Proud of you.
It's been nice. I've been reading some good ones. I read Between You and Me by Joanna Horton, which was set in Brisbane. We haven't spoken about this yet, have we, Bridget?
I read that too.
Yeah.
Oh, cuties. Yeah. You guys have a much closer taste in books than I think either of you do with me.
Yeah, I think we overlap a lot and then disagree in surprising places. But you liked this book, didn't you?
Yeah, I really did.
So did I. And it was a lot more, like it spanned a much larger period of time than I thought it was going to. I thought it was just going to be a tale of, two 20-somethings hooking up with this older man. And then they find out that the most important thing was the friendship they had with each other or something. But it was
the friends they made along the way.
It had a lot more depth. I really liked it. I feel like a lot of the Australian bookstagrammers that we follow have been reading it. It's got a really pretty cover. So
yeah, nice green and pink.
Nothing else major happening in my month. How about you, Bridget?
Tonight, I will be going to my 5th Women's World Cup game, which is very exciting.
Yes.
Erin's going to come too.
Yeah. I'm so excited.
The quarterfinal.
I was so devo that my trip to Japan overlapped with this.
Yeah.
And then this is something you probably will care about less, but the World Championships of swimming were in Japan at the same time. I was there, but on a different island, so I couldn't go to those either. I was so annoyed about it.
Well, all credit has to go to Brian because he has spent hours on the FIFA website trying to get tickets. So we started calling him Box Office B because he literally had about 9 tickets to every game. So you could have come if you were in the country.
He's such a king.
So he was selling them and just offering them to people. We have been to 4, but tonight is Matilda's first France. So
that's so exciting.
Hopefully, when we're listening to this in September, it will be the World Cup winners.
Oh my
Matilda.
God, stop it. That's so exciting.
So, yeah, very exciting. Other than that, Speak Now, Taylor's version came out. That was a big highlight of my life. 1989, Taylor's version was just announced.
We asked about your month.
That is my month. A lot of live streams. That's about it really. I did read Between You and Me and I liked that a lot. Another one I liked was Search History.
I read that as well.
Did you like that too? Yeah.
In the same month.
Yeah.
Oh my
That
God.
is so funny.
Very spooky.
Yeah. It was good.
I liked it as well. Yeah. I think when I was reading it, I really thought I was reading a thriller. Like it had a really sort of tense through line. And I just kind of kept checking the blurb thinking, wait, is this meant to be a romance or is some bad shit going to go down?
I didn't know what was going to happen because I didn't read the blurb again. And I listened to it. Listened to it as an audiobook, I think. Yeah, actually, speaking of audiobooks, Natural Beauty by Ling Huang.
Oh, I've been trying to get my mitts on that.
It was fantastic. But then I also listened to an audiobook ARC that we got through the podcast called Small Worlds by Caleb Azuma Nelson. And it's the second book I have read by that author and just really beautiful, poetic, lovely. I loved it.
One final comment on the books I read, and I know this is another book that you read and really enjoyed, but I listened to Our Wives Under the Sea.
Oh, yes.
And I found the writing really beautiful, but I accidentally listened to it like the week after the submarine submersible saga.
Oh, no.
And so, I mean, a bit sick, but I was obviously obsessed with those events as they unfolded. And I think Our Wives Under the Sea was too beautiful and not enough just like submarine mystery. I was like, when's the spooky stuff happening? Like,
I was really creeped out by the end of it. It was creepy.
And it was a bit gross. I really enjoyed it, but it didn't. I was like,
it didn't give you the
more
trauma you were
tacky
expecting.
drama. Yeah. Where are the billionaires? Where are the orcas that are like learned how to use machetes or something?
Where's My Heart Will Go On playing on a loop.
And a tin whistle enough to
Anyway,
make a
rest in
grown
peace.
woman cry.
R.I.P. R.I.P.
R.I.P.
Speaking of R.I.P. Bridget was going through a box of heirlooms before.
Oh, no.
Bridget.
Yeah, Bridget was hunting through a box of heirlooms, trying to uncover some evidence of our high school dramatic escapades.
Just mysteries of our past, really, because I've forgotten everything.
And you didn't uncover too much in the way of what we got up to in high school, but you did find a really stunning piece of jewelry.
Yeah, if a archaeologist found it in 50 years, it will really show how society was feeling in, I think, October or November of 2006.
To the year.
I picked it up and I was like, oh, a friendship bracelet, cool. And then I read what was on it and it says... in beautiful pastel colours like love hearts, R.I.P. Steve Irwin and Peter Brock. R.I.P. I don't know why I didn't include Colin Teale because he died in the same week. For those of you listening outside Australia, Peter Brock was a V8 supercar racer and he crashed into a tree and died. So that was very
week?
sad.
Or same day.
No,
week?
like
It was all
same
same
week.
week.
Yeah.
It was a tough
and-
time to be a child
Yeah,
in
especially in my
Australia.
family. My family love Peter Brock. We are big bogans. So, so anyway, put your friendship bracelets out for Peter Brock and Steve Owen. Rest in peace.
R.I.P.
I think I'm going to wear it. I might put it on right now,
I think
actually.
you should. I think
Thank
that was
you.
such a funny time in like Australian history. I cannot remember another time where students were gathered to watch a public funeral before.
Funeral. And I remember shushing people in my grade 7 class being like,
Yes.
have some respect.
Yeah.
Bindi Irwin is reading a poem.
Yeah.
My daddy was so
my
nice
best
to me.
friend. Oh.
And John Williamson
Oh my
singing
God.
True Blue. Every time I listen to that, I just cry.
Oh, it's so sad.
We had a memorial in our school, like principal's office, and I wrote a poem and it got put up with the memorial, and I had this line in it that I thought was just like bars. I thought it was so good. And it said something like, "Stingray, gotcha now, too late to swim away." And I was like, oof.
That's deep.
That cuts deep.
making
It
me
is too
tear up.
late because you're dead.
That's almost like antagonistic. Too late to swim now, Steve.
It's quite menacing.
What are you going to do?
When you told me this story before, I wasn't sure where you were going. I thought you were going to make a reference to Stingray from Neighbours.
Oh my God.
Also,
Another tragedy.
don't say that.
Where's my bracelet about Stingray?
It's not too late.
Put your camp chairs out for Stingray.
So before we get too carried away into our discussions, obviously a key theme throughout this book is the Shakespeare element. And look, we have boasted before about the dizzying heights of our high school drama careers.
career.
Yeah, I mean, not to be downplayed, we are incredibly talented, always have been, always will be.
Preach.
That said, I did struggle at points, and I think it would be fun if we did this BuzzFeed quiz I found where we have to guess the Shakespearean tragedy based on its first line.
Sounds great because I loved all the Shakespeare in this, but by God, I didn't know where most of it was from. So I'm excited.
All right, 10 tragedies, 10 questions, 10 opportunities to win.
I'm just going to say I don't feel confident in myself.
Yeah,
No.
I can name like 3 tragedies.
I'm like,
Every time it's a trivia question, Erin and I are like,
We did this in drama. Othello.
or Macbeth.
first quote. Before we proceed any further, hear me speak.
Do we have options?
We do, 2 of them. Never heard of.
Fuck.
Our options are Antony and Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, Titus Andronicus, and Coriolanus.
The C one. I'm going to guess Julius Caesar.
Sounds very Caesar, doesn't it?
He seems like a self-important guy. Shall we
Yeah.
lock in Caesar?
Yeah.
Wrong.
Oh. It's going well. It's going really well.
The line is spoken by the first citizen in Coriolanus.
Oh, it was the C one.
Yeah. From now on, no hesitation.
Okay.
Next
Gut
line.
Instinct.
Who's there? Our options are Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, or Titus Andronicus. I think Macbeth.
Oh.
I think Hamlet.
I
Is
was
Hamlet
thinking
one?
Hamlet. My first instinct was Hamlet.
Okay, we'll go with Hamlet.
Imagine if it's Macbeth.
You're correct.
Yay!
This line is spoken by Bernardo in Hamlet. Oh, shit. Here we go. Next line. Nay, but this dotage of our generals o'erflows the measure. I'm sorry, we're not getting much flair on these lines. Not a lot of meaning can be gathered from my delivery of them, I have to say. Our
Mr.
options-
Redacted would be so disappointed.
I know. Weeping.
Sorry.
Our options are Antony and Cleopatra, Othello, Macbeth, or King Lear.
I think King Lear.
Sure.
Wrong.
Oh,
This is spoken by Philo in Antony and Cleopatra. Also,
I haven't read that.
That's fine. We
Yeah.
don't know that one.
No.
And also, don't even say anything to me if I'm saying any of these words wrong because I can't handle it. Okay.
Think typos, but 10 times worse.
Oh.
She's fragile.
Okay, next line. Home, you idle creatures. Get you home. Is this the holiday? King Lear. I want to say Timon, but I think it's Timon of Athens. Julius Caesar or Romeo and Juliet.
I think Julius Caesar, but I have been wrong most times.
Let's go Caesar because I have no thoughts. Yes, you're right.
Yay!
You're so good at this. This is spoken by Flavius in Julius Caesar.
Respect.
Oh, this one, if we don't get this, we
We're
should be put
idiots.
down. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
2 households, both alike in dignity.
Yay.
Romeo and Juliet.
Yep, this one as well. I think I know it. When shall we 3 meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?
Oh, that's Macbeth.
Yeah. Okay, next line. Tush, never tell me. Our options are King Lear, Othello, Titus Andronicus, or Timon of Athens.
I have no thoughts.
I really love Othello, but I can't remember how it starts.
I think we haven't picked either of the T ones.
Let's try Timon.
Also, it was wrong. It was Othello.
Fuck!
Good Good day, sir. Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, Timon of Athens, or Titus Andronicus?
The Athens one.
Yeah.
Screw this game.
Yeah.
Screw you, Buzz.
yay.
It was right.
Yay! We're
right.
the best.
Noble patricians, patrons of my right, defend the justice of my cause with arms.
Oh, surely that's Julius Caesar.
You'd think
Have
so.
we-
But we already got a
Oh,
Caesar
okay.
one.
Anthony and Cleopatra.
But we had one of those as well,
Oh,
didn't we?
did we?
Titus Andronicus.
Oh,
Yay! Slay all day.
I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, Romeo and Juliet.
King Lear.
King Lear.
Must be.
Yes.
Crushed it. We got 7 out of 10.
Pretty good.
Yes.
It says, you guys, this is so nice. It says, wow, you know a lot of Shakespeare's tragedies. You love Shakespeare's works and can definitely call yourself an aficionado. Kudos.
Shakespeare is our thing.
It's our thing. But that's so
So-
funny.
I'm going to put it on my resume.
Actually, we did that so that everybody that's listening to this episode can't say shit. Okay, we are qualified. We know exactly what we're talking about.
Just
BuzzFeed
ignore
told us.
all the bits where we guessed.
And if
But
there's
I feel
anything we're missing that's really obvious, just shut up about it. We don't want to know about it. So I was excited but hesitant to read this book because, as I always talk about, I'm looking for a book that will fill the secret history shaped hole in my chest. And I have read quite a few books that promise to be like the next secret history or like the same vibes or whatever. And I always end up feeling a bit let down. I find them to be kind of like hollow in comparison. And so I was really excited to read this because it's had the most appealing premise out of any of the ones I've read. But again, just kind of reluctant because it was popping up on the same reading lists as some of the other books we've read on the podcast. Overall, I was really excited to read this book though.
I don't think I had any expectations going into this. I only vaguely knew it was dark academia. Don't even really know what that means anyway. I didn't know it was so like Shakespearean either. I think I just bought it because it looked pretty and I'd just seen a bit of hype but didn't know anything about it. What about you, B-Bell?
I was hesitant to read it because have always felt like it would be a book that I enjoy, but I have been burned so many times on this podcast
Oh.
by the books that we choose to read because of the internet. But I also have this thing where if I think I will like a book, I just never read it.
So you don't get let down.
Yeah. So like I haven't read any Sally Rooney books because I think I'll really like them. I haven't read A Little Life. I don't know, so many books. This was one of them. And I haven't read The Secret History either, but I think I would like that book because I've read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt and I really loved that book. I think that I would really like it, but I don't know. I just never want to pick them up. So it is good that I'm forced to read them.
Well, that's really exciting because so often when we go around and say what our initial thoughts were, all of us say, I wasn't really excited to read this book, but
I was excited to read it when we decided it was a pod book. Like before I cracked it open, I was like, yeah, don't really know what I'm getting into, but full steam ahead. Excited vibes.
I also really like the dark academia aesthetic. Just a Pinterest dream, really.
Did you look at Pinterest boards for this book?
Not yet.
They are delightful.
I
They're
can
such a
just
good vibe.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's cozy, it's wintry, it's moody. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
But saying that, I haven't actually read any dark academia except for one book that was loosely dark academia, and that was an ARC that we also got called This Is How We End Things by R.J. Jacobs, and I did not like that book.
It was such a letdown. It's one of the books that promised to fill that gap, and it was such a hollow, I don't know, box ticking exercise.
So I think after I read that and I'd heard those same comparisons, I was thinking, well, maybe I wouldn't like The Secret History because if it's like that, I don't want to read it.
As always, if you don't want things spoiled for you for this one, now's your chance to back out. Equally, if you don't like rude words, please proceed with caution. There are a lot of content warnings for this book, so please do your due diligence on that. But we want to flag a few of drug and alcohol abuse, themes of depression, disordered eating, homophobia, violence, sexual content, and self-harm. This is not an exhaustive list, so please do what you got to do.
On the day Oliver Marks is released from jail, the man who put him there is waiting at the door. Detective Colburn wants to know the truth, and after 10 years, Oliver is finally ready to tell it.
A decade ago, Oliver is one of 7 young Shakespearean actors at Delacher Classical Conservatory, a place of keen ambition and fierce competition.
In this secluded world of firelight and leather-bound books, Oliver and his friends play the same roles on stage and off. Hero, villain, tyrant, temptress, ingenue, extra.
But in their 4th and final year, good-natured rivalries turn ugly, and on opening night, real violence invades the students' world of make-believe.
In the morning, the 4th years find themselves facing their very own tragedy and their greatest acting challenge yet, convincing the police, each other, and themselves that they are innocent. Alrighty, so now that we've actually read the book, how are you feeling about it?
I finished really recently, so I think I'm still partially digesting what I read. I think I really liked it. I think it was pretentious in the way that all theatre students are. I think it moved pretty quickly. It read like a play. It felt like a play. It did a good job and was really self-referential. It was this is the art that we love, and in doing so, we are mimicking the art that we love.
Absolutely, yes. Agree with everything you said. I was actually really reluctant to talk about this because I think I started reading it before both of you. I think I was about halfway through before either of you started it, and I was really enjoying it. And we all know I'm not really great at taking criticisms on the things that I love. And so I was feeling really defensive and protective in anticipation, because I initially struggled, the first 50 pages, I was oh, shut up with the Shakespeare. I don't know, is this whole book going to be like this?
It's a lot in the beginning.
Yeah. And I thought, oh, what if they think it's pretentious? What if they trash it? Because eventually I got into it and suddenly I was if you don't love Shakespeare, then what are you doing? So I was feeling really reluctant to talk about it, but agree with everything you said, Erin. I really ended up enjoying this, and I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it. I don't think it's the greatest piece of literature ever written, but overall really enjoyed it and still am really digesting and thinking about it.
Yeah, it's living in my brain, and I think it will live in there for a little bit. What did you think, Bridget?
I loved it so much.
Yay!
Yeah.
I was nervous you wouldn't.
No, I loved it. This is exactly my kind of book. And pretentious is when characters are pretentious, it's good. They use great language. And it's pretentious because they use these stupid words that no one ever uses, but you're sucked in and it was so good. I was sobbing when I finished. I was so sad. And I had the ending spoiled and I knew what was going to happen and I was still so sad.
What specifically was spoiled for you?
So I saw a TikTok and I read really fast. And so when I look at something, I've read it.
Oh, no.
And
it was
said,
that final paragraph?
No, it was James killed himself in October.
Oh,
I know.
That's rude.
And I just think that would have been, if I did not know that, oh my God, it would have been the best book ever. It was still good, but I did like that. I said to you guys, it was probably, I think I was 30 pages in when I saw that.
That's so annoying.
So I didn't know when it was going to happen. And I thought that he would be the one that died first. I didn't know that Richard was going to die. But I think even though it was a bit disappointing, it was quite good because I got to read the book with that lens and I could see the foreshadowing. And so I could see how he was unraveling and how he would get to that point from the start. So I don't really mind that it was spoiled.
And I guess there's another twist after that anyway that wasn't spoiled for you. So
yeah.
It reminded me of actually pretty much exactly the same when I was watching Downton Abbey.
Oh.
I mean,
God.
spoiler alert, but Matthew's death was spoiled for me. And so I was like,
it's so
okay,
sad.
I'm ready for that. But I didn't know that Sybil died.
Sybil dying was the worst.
Sybil, I was so sad after Sybil died. So,
Yeah.
it was the same thing. Like I knew one,
Yeah.
but the other one was still really sad. But I loved it. And if The Secret History is like this, I think I might read it pretty soon. Even if it's different. Like I don't mind, but yeah.
I feel like I'm chasing the vibes of this. I don't often reread books, but I feel like I definitely want to reread this.
I'm feeling
Me
the
too.
same.
Yeah.
I will say The Secret History, I think the characters overall are much less likable, a bit more
Yeah.
repulsive.
I do wonder though if, I don't know, obviously as we said, we are Shakespeare girlies. We've been there, we've done that. I wonder how this goes for people who don't have that background knowledge of at least some of the plays. Because there were times when they were referencing plays that I'm more familiar with that I was like, I see how you're tying the original text to their story and then also whatever their play is. Like, and then like the back and forth banter with the quotes was interesting because it ties in the different subtext from all the plays. And so I wonder if you're reading it without that knowledge, if it's harder to get through.
I think it must be. And even something that I struggled with reading it was that it has been so long since I've read any Shakespeare or even like watched a movie of a Shakespeare play. I really struggled to get the rhythm or the meter of it and like find the meaning in the words because I knew that there had to be meaning in what they were saying to one another. Even if I didn't get the context of where it was in the play, like I just wanted to even understand what the line meant. And so that was a struggle for me initially. I think I eased into it a bit more. But I think, yeah, so much meaning would be lost if you weren't already familiar.
And it would irritate you so much because at the start I was thinking, is the whole book going to be like this? Like he is so annoying.
Yes.
Oliver is so annoying. Like, oh, I guess you would say I'm attractive, but only mildly so. I'm only there because I'm the backup. That was annoying me. And then the Shakespeare, I was like, nobody talks like this.
Yeah.
But then suddenly I didn't care.
Yeah, the whole scene where it's just like one after the other. line. Shut the fuck up. You're so annoying.
Yeah.
But then it's also like, I remember being in drama class doing that kind of shit. I learned how to type really fast by typing out Romeo and Juliet. So I knew that really well. And me and my best mate used to quote it all the time. So it is just that kind of annoying theatre kid shit. And now that I think we're kind of removed from it, we're like, that's so fucking annoying.
Well,
But it's fun when you're in it.
absolutely. And I think this is something I wanted to talk about. This is my kind of tangential point. So I hope that I can spit it out. But I think when I initially started the book, I was feeling really irritated by the characters and this kind of inside joke and the way that they were speaking in Shakespeare quotes to one another and performing and acting or whatever was their whole lives. And they were treating it with such gravity and such seriousness as though it was important as other careers, like, I don't know, being a lawyer or a doctor or whatever society holds in high standing. I was initially struggling because I think society, dare I say, and I'm not excluding myself from that, like to put down people that take creative pursuits very seriously because people do have that kind of, well, you're not putting out fires, like it's not a big deal mentality around these things. And I was approaching reading this book with that kind of idea. And when I started to think about it, I was like, why do I think that? Like, you love drama, you love movies, you love reading, you love writing, you love all of these different kinds of creative pursuits. And it is that serious. Like, in times of struggle or adversity, like, we turn to the arts to give voice to like the feelings that we can't articulate. They bring us together in this kind of voiceless way. And so I do think that they deserve to be treated with seriousness and gravity. And even though it was a bit jarring to read initially, once I was sort of had that pep talk with myself and was like, calm down. You do think it's important. You do like the arts. It's not, it's not a big deal. I really settled into reading it and enjoying it a lot more.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think also the character's ages feeds into that because you're like, oh, what would you know? You're just kids. Why are you taking this so seriously? And I think even Oliver's parents have that vibe because they don't want him to pursue acting. And only, is it 2 or 3 of them have the luxury of having supporting parents that want them to do acting. And you're absolutely right. Like, the arts is a really valid career choice despite what society wants you to think. And it's important that they take it seriously. And I think how seriously they take it is a really important plot device because it makes you take it seriously, but also realize the immense pressure and stress they're in because this is their whole career and they are in this little bubble, like cult. Oliver describes it as a cult. And
well, it's a community.
Yeah. And you can totally get that when it's like a perfect storm with how serious they are, the intense emotions that they have to feel in their roles and stuff. And everything is just heightened. No wonder this crazy shit happened. They're just obsessed with tragedy. Of course, everyone's going to go off the rails.
I think it's funny, just expanding on your point, Laura, I don't think there's another aspect of life, except for maybe sport, that creates such a sense of community. Think about fandoms. People come together from everywhere and they just have this one thing in common. They consume this art and they love it.
And they build upon it. You know, like Shakespeare clearly still exists in so many different iterations today. It's timeless. It is community building. It's like this magical thing that we can all share in together in one way or another.
But I think they cover this a little as well when Oliver's talking about how much he loves Shakespeare with the detective.
Colburn says to Oliver, "You read anything besides Shakespeare?" "Sure, Shakespeare doesn't exist in a vacuum." "How so?" I couldn't tell if he was truly interested or if it was some kind of ploy. "Well, take Caesar," I said, unsure of what sort of incriminating information he might hope to get from the question. Ostensibly, it's all about the fall of the Roman Republic, but it's also about the politics of early modern England. In the first scene, the tribunes and revellers talk about traders and holidays like it's London in 1599, even though it's supposed to be 44 BC. There are a few anachronisms, like the clock in Act 2, but for the most part it works both ways. "Clever man," Colburn said after a moment's consideration. "You know, I remember reading Caesar in school. They never told us any of that, just dragged us through it. I must have been about 15. I thought I was being punished for something. Anything can feel like punishment if it's taught poorly."
I think we were really lucky to have passionate teachers around us that imparted their passion onto us, I guess.
Yeah, and I think learning it in a drama sense as well as an English sense really helped drive the points of the text home.
And it is funny that you said about how they're in the bubble because I was reflecting on this myself. Like in high school, we were in drama productions and like we had to do live performances for music and we were in musicals. And at that time, that was my whole world. And I felt like everybody was aware of what was happening. But now I work in a high school and there's a musical happening and I didn't even know about it until it was on assembly that the musical was next week. And I just think it's so funny how something can be so all-consuming, but no one else cares about it. But it's so nice to be a part of that.
Oh, it's so good.
Nice.
Like when they were talking about like the dress rehearsals and seeing the stage for the first time, it was so nostalgic because I loved acting. And I think even now there's nothing that compares to when you were performing on stage. It is such a different experience and them living it in the book. It just felt so familiar and so homely, except for when they got abused on stage. None of that happened.
When they were murdered would probably be the key point for me. But yeah, I absolutely agree. Talking about like rushing backstage, like jamming your costumes on, watching from the wings, like being able to see the other people on the other side of the stage.
Getting scolded for talking.
Yeah. Bridget, you had the ending spoiled for you. Erin, you thought you guessed it. What point did you figure it out?
I guessed it too.
Which bit did you guess? I'm curious.
I guessed that James killed Richard because he said he's still alive. And that's when I was like, oh, well, he killed him. He's not saying, oh, my God, we need to go and save him. He's thinking he's not dead.
I figured from pretty early on in like Act 1 that whatever happened, James did it and Philippa helped him cover it up. But it was particularly clear when Philippa was at the fireplace. I knew she was covering something up. And then there was another line a bit later where Oliver comments on the ashes in the fireplace being bundled up or whatever. And I was like, there's something in the fucking ashes.
Yeah.
But also like the shower scene was a huge giveaway.
Yes.
Like, I think to the reader it got obvious as the book went on, but I really enjoyed the way they explained how Oliver didn't put it together. And once it started clicking in his brain, I liked when James was wasted at the end and Oliver was like, ugh, James is drunk. And then he's like, wait, but James didn't drink anything that night that he said he was spewing. Why was he in the bathroom? And it was like that moment that he started to question his like closest friend.
Yeah.
Because he'd suspected everyone else already. But that was the turning point. And I thought that was such a cool way because even when you watch plays as the audience, because you're seeing everything, you can predict it. And I really liked the way they kept Oliver as like a true play character who is only seeing his part and you have to watch him solve the mystery or the tragedy himself.
I think I thought it was James for a period of time at the start, but then I thought, oh, well, it would be too obvious because Richard was laying into him. He has a super clear motive, and I had read that there was a huge twist.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, they must be setting us up to think it's James. And so keeping in mind the secret history comparison, I was really thinking that Oliver was going to be an unreliable narrator. And when it started to get really messy in the middle, like when him and James were scrapping on stage and Richard was dead and
R.I.P.
Alexander was off his chops and Meredith was sad and everyone was like doing their own thing, I thought that was the point where Oliver would like slip into some little delusion and then in the end it would be like, oh, by the way, here's my secret. I killed him. And so the ending did shock me because I gaslit myself into thinking that it was too obvious. And so I did miss some of those. Like I missed plenty of those points that both of you clearly saw.
I liked throughout the book, Alexander, I think mainly was the one who said it, but kept saying to Oliver that you are naive, unaware, unobservant of everything that's happening around you. And they just kept saying it. So that was another clue, I thought.
And I really liked that as well because it made it really clear why everyone else was hiding it from him. Because I think it's obvious Alexander knew, whether or not Philippa told him or whatever. But I think Alexander knew. And I think that's what prompted his downfall as well, is that he figured it out and didn't know how to deal with it and didn't want to say anything to Oliver.
Especially because he was the one who suggested not helping him.
Yeah, you've always got that one friend who's down for murder and it's Alex.
I just, even like it's obviously a terrible thing and I don't understand how you can make that decision, but I don't know if they had got him out of the water, would he have survived? He seemed like when the way they described him when they first got to the lake,
Sickening.
Yeah.
horrible.
Brutal.
I don't think he would have survived anyway, but
The whole lead up to Richard's murder was so great. I have a note here that says, Richard, don't know what his fucking problem is, but I love the absolute sense of menace he's providing. I really think he was such a menacing presence, and I felt so on edge anytime he was in a scene. He felt so volatile, and I didn't know what his deal was, but I was here for it. And I think it was really true to Shakespeare in that way as well. Like, I remember Brown and I watched The Much Ado with Keanu in it.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. And the whole time, his character's just really there to like throw some barbs, lurk in the doorway.
The best
and,
characters.
Yeah, mess some stuff up. And I think that's so true of Shakespeare that there are often just characters that are just pure antagonists.
Yeah, and they're the best ones.
They
Othello,
really are.
Tybalt, Richard. Like, just bad bitches.
All the classics.
Yeah.
I feel like the right word is tense every time he came on, and he wasn't alive for more than I don't know.
Yeah, he's not in there for very
40
long.
pages, but he is such a presence.
Yeah.
They kept saying about his like the physicality of him or his booming voice, and he just filled the book, and you can really imagine just being haunted by this massive man who is just an aggressive villain.
That is another thing as well that I was thinking, because I feel that in Shakespeare there is often an element of supernatural, like with a ghost visiting and like hauntings and witches. And so for a while there, when they were talking about having these nightmares about Richard or seeing him in the corner of their vision or whatever it was, for a second I was thinking like, holy shit, like, is this going to get magic in it? Like, la la.
I think it did a good job as well, because we talked a bit before about how hard this would probably be if you didn't know Shakespeare already. But I think the way that the author like stacked the Shakespeare plays referenced in the book meant that you could see that sometimes characters died and came back as ghosts before it actually happened in the plot of the story. And so it was self-referential, but it was also preparing any quote-unquote uneducated readers for what was going to happen when Richard's like haunting them all.
And it was so interesting, his casting. So he was a ghost in both Julius Caesar and Macbeth.
Yeah, the foreshadowing.
The performances they put on, like the secret roles and just meeting in the forest in the middle of the night. Isn't that just incredible?
I loved it.
This would make a great movie.
Oh my God, I want to see it so bad.
It would make such a good movie. But one thing I struggled with was the setting, because I think it's set in rural Idaho, right?
It's so weird.
No, Illinois. And I just thought that was like potato farming territory. I did not know what that was.
I think the fact it's in America doesn't make any sense.
No.
The lines that all the characters have, I cannot imagine in an American accent. And you've got people from New York, California, Chicago. None of those accents fit what they're saying here. Some of the words that they say in here, like frightfully, I can't imagine Americans say frightfully.
I was trying to picture it as like the Dead Poet Society. That was the way I could make it fit in my mind.
Yeah, okay.
There was a line at the start that I thought was funny. As an Australian, Oliver said something about a fortnightly visit.
Oh my God.
And he was
I
like,
thought this
yeah,
was dumb
of course
too.
you would say fortnight.
Yeah.
And I was like, do Americans not say fortnight?
That's what I thought.
Bi-weekly?
What do they say?
I was
2
like,
weeks?
bitch, what's wrong with fortnight?
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that was confused by that.
It didn't matter how many times they said that these characters were American or in American. Everything was in British accents to me.
I never imagine America, anything. It's always.
It doesn't exist to you.
Yeah.
I don't
Any
perceive
book
it.
like this is in, the United Kingdom or Europe or Australia even. I could imagine it more here than in America. Like
just something with really like softer accents.
stone buildings, like crumbling castles and
Death, the
foggy.
undiscovered country.
Yeah.
Should we talk about Oliver?
Yeah, let's do a deep dive on the characters, I think.
I had a love-hate relationship with being in his head. I think he was a really good kind of blank canvas, and I really understand his role in the story. And like, especially as the story progressed, I really enjoyed having him as the little vessel into the story, watching it all unfold. But God, I was so sick of reading about like, you're the best of us, like you're so much more handsome than you give yourself credit for, or like it was very like pick me soft
He's
boy
not like
kind
other
of
girls.
yeah.
Laura said before about the unreliable narrator, and when it was those bits that I was reading, I was really thinking, okay, you are just really spinning this story to make yourself like not like a hero, but like a myth or a legend within the story. And especially when they went back to the school and his face was scratched out of class photos and people were stealing things, like it was a real like folk story.
Well, I think that's interesting because there is nothing to say that he's not an unreliable narrator. We only ever see the story from his point of view, and it is, to our understanding, what he's telling the detective. He has no reason to lie to the detective, but he also has no reason to tell him the truth. he can say whatever he wants to him because his friends have all agreed to keep the secret, whatever the secret may be. James is obviously keeping his end of whatever the secret is. Like, there's actually no guarantee that what we have is the truth. Because I also was kind of put off when they were talking about how his face was scratched out in the pictures and stuff. And I thought, I wonder what everyone else's perception of the situation is. Because think also when Oliver and Meredith were at the bar and everyone was giving them all these snide looks, like, I can't believe they're doing that. Oliver tells this story like he was innocent and he was just bopping along, dragged along in the whole thing.
My favourite Aaron phrase. The last few episodes have no bopping along and I really missed it.
Glad to have you back.
Oliver's
He
really
is just bopping along.
But
no one ever looks at me. He hates to be perceived.
Yeah. But yet people are perceiving them and they're perceiving him badly. But in the story, he's doing nothing wrong.
That is something I struggled with. I did not like his personality. I thought he was irresponsible. I thought he was selfish, except for when it concerned James or even the rest of them. But I can understand that. He treated his family badly, even though they may have treated him badly. And then when he was told that his father could no longer afford to bankroll his expensive school, he just like flew into this rage. Just get a job.
But I think that's part of what feeds the cult vibes. Like, he can't even fathom not going back to that school and not continuing that culty life he's got there. So I can fully understand. It's all that heightened emotions stuff again. He never had to consider that he was never going back. And the thought just actually makes him crazy.
This is one book where for me the dual timelines really worked because I did enjoy the really kind of like wanky, grandiose way that adult Oliver spoke to Colburn about his time there and the way that they were and the way things were. And there is a quote from him which I just thought like, oh God, shut up. And it's in that same section where Colburn says, do you blame Shakespeare for any of it? And he's reflecting, he says, we spent 4 years, most of us years before that, immersed in Shakespeare, submerged. Here we could indulge our collective obsession. We spoke it as a second language, conversed in poetry and lost touch with reality a little. Blah, blah, blah. And he's like wanging on like this. And then Colburn's just listening and he says, our sheer capacity for feeling got to be so unwieldy that we staggered under it like Atlas with the weight of the world.
Yeah, just such a like theater kid.
Yeah, and I did love that. Like,
yeah.
And he even has this line here where he says, I slow down, come to a stop, frustrated by my own inability to express myself, a frustration exacerbated by the fact that after 10 years, I still think of myself as an actor. And I really liked the line in this section, and it's probably one of the most quoted lines from this that I've seen floating around. But he says in the lead up, the thing about Shakespeare is he's so eloquent. He speaks the unspeakable. He turns grief and triumph and rapture and rage into words, into something we can understand. He renders the whole mystery of humanity comprehensible. I stop, shrug. You can justify anything if you do it poetically enough. I think that's such a great line.
And it's so true as well, like, because the whole book is a justification of how they murdered this guy.
Yeah.
And how they explain it. Like, if you take out the culty vibes, how immersed they are in it, what Richard did not warrant murder.
No, but I was encouraging them to murder him. I
You
was like,
would.
yeah, leave him. He's horrible.
He's a mean man.
He's a mean man. Yeah. But then at the end I was like, he wasn't really that bad. Like,
yeah.
they just had another term.
And the way they were so convinced that nobody could help them, like that they couldn't just go to the teacher and say, hey, Richard's abusing us. Can we get him kicked out of school, please? Like, here's the evidence. I'm covered in bruises and we'll all back each other up. Like, they were so
scared of being snitches.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
so
they said,
insular, like so with the idea of the six of them, the seven
us
of
against
them
the
together.
world.
Yeah.
And I think it was because they were in this environment where they didn't have to clean up after themselves. They didn't have to fund their own education. They really were living just this privileged life, even if some of their family lives weren't perfect. They just thought that everything they did was it.
Yeah, well, because they were the only people in their grade. They were the last remaining actors.
Wild. But also, like, can't tell the police the truth. I struggled with that one. I think if they had explained what had happened, like, obviously there would still be consequences. They didn't plan to murder him, but, you know, I just, so much of that could have been avoided. And I don't know why they were surprised when everybody just shattered, I think was the word that he used. Like they came back together and shattered. Like they all withdrew from each other at the same time.
I loved that section. That was like my favorite
Incredible.
section of the book, when they were all just losing the plot and just like unraveling, and things were getting so messy. Like that scene between Meredith and James where Gwendolyn is being really inappropriate. She's like, you know, you want him so much, and like you think
She
you're
was
too
horrible.
good.
Yeah.
She was a nasty
Gwendolyn was
lady.
off the rails.
Very inappropriate, I have to say, for a teacher. But I was breathless throughout that scene.
Yes.
It was fantastic.
Yeah,
Even in the first scene with Gwendolyn where they had to talk about their insecurities, I wanted to die.
I would not survive that.
That's horrible. The poor
My
Meredith.
God. But also I thought it was crazy that there was so much time spent on Meredith's one. And then it was like, blah, blah, blah. That was everyone else's insecurities.
But I guess that was setting up for Richard's attack on her later, like using her insecurity against her. But the school should not run.
No. My final thoughts on Oliver. I think the book does a pretty explicit job of setting up the character archetypes that all the characters are going to fit into. So Oliver is set up to be the loyal sidekick, and you think that that's what he's doing, or like the role he's playing when he takes the fall for James. But the whole story is from his point of view. He's actually the hero of this story, and he's the hero of James's story. And I'm curious why he never realizes that, or is that because he is the one telling the story, he's making himself the hero of the story when he's only ever been the sidekick before that? So does that feed into the unreliable narrator thing, where he saw his opportunity, his only opportunity ever to be the hero, and he just took it and he ran with it? Because they say that it's because he loves James, and I believe he does love James, but does he do it out of love for James because he's the sidekick, or does he do it because he sees it as his only opportunity to get that hero role that he has never been able to achieve before?
That's such an interesting thought. I had not considered that before now.
Because he is really the only person who performs two character archetypes. Everyone else stays pretty clear in their one. Because even though James murders Richard, he doesn't fall into the villain archetype. He's not a villain. Even when he's confronted with it, he obviously feels very guilty for what he did. And when he's confronted with it, he admits it straight away. He wants to save Richard. So he is still the hero, even in his mistakes. But Oliver is the only person who kind of gets a second archetype, which only really becomes clear once you're at the end of the story.
I think it might be a little bit of both, because the only people that would know that he is the hero, like the main one, would be James. So maybe because he loves James, he wants to be James's hero. So he wants to be the hero. He loves James.
Yeah, I think
no
so.
one else will ever know.
He wants to be the hero to James's story instead of just the loyal sidekick. And I guess like the sidekick can be a hero in its own way as well. But I think that's interesting, the transition. And it's interesting. If I ever read it again, I'd be curious if I could pinpoint the time when he transitions from the sidekick to the hero.
Something that I noticed that falls into this as well, like he would always put himself down and I'm just a sidekick. But when it came to massive things, he was the one that stepped up. He was the one who went into the lake to get Richard, and he looked back and he saw the five of them huddled together, and he was amazed by how young they looked. It was like they were children and they wanted their parents to come and swoop in and save the day.
Yeah.
He was the one who went in.
Because he knew it couldn't be them.
So I feel like all along he was playing that role of the responsible one. And I think there was also a line that he said that maybe it's because he hadn't had such a sheltered upbringing like the rest of them. And I wonder if he thought that maybe he was more in touch with the real world than the others were.
Which is interesting because Oliver doesn't appear to have a very hard life anyway. His parents, even though they didn't agree with his career choice, they still funded it. He had two sisters who were also struggling, but he was completely separated from their lives. Like, I'm curious what Oliver perceives to be this big struggle that he's been through.
His parents are still married. They still live in their childhood home.
Yeah.
They obviously have money. He's
had that difficult conversation with him together. Like, I'm curious if I were to read it again, if I would think that the shift from sidekick to hero is also a potential argument towards unreliable narrator as well.
And I found him really insincere at points as well, because I think to me it was really clear throughout that he was in love with James. At least initially, it seemed very much that he didn't have a lot of regard for Meredith. He didn't really, it's not that he was speaking negatively about her in the same way that James was, but he didn't really see her as a very interesting or complex kind of person. Like when he finally, even after they've been hooking up for, I don't know, months, and he's allegedly been enjoying it, when he goes to visit her for Christmas, he's like, oh, I just realized she must be kind of lonely. And he seems to see her as just this one-dimensional kind of being. And so that really turned me away from him as well, because I don't know. I was wondering what role he was trying to fill. If he, like, it's something he was questioning himself, if he was trying to fill Richard's shoes, if he had seized that opportunity. You know, she was an appealing woman, as we were repeatedly told, and you'd be crazy if you didn't want her.
I really feel bad for Meredith. Everyone was so mean to Meredith all the time. When she first propositioned Oliver, and he was so mean to her, and she was like, fuck this, I'm out. And he was like, wait, but I actually still kind of want to.
Yeah.
Like, he was just an asshole. They all called her a slut all the time. Even though they knew she was insecure about it, they were just really mean to her.
We saw little glimpses of her character, and I wanted to know more. Like, she was often described as brushing Ren's hair, or like pushing Ren's hair off her forehead when she was feeling unwell. Like, she was really caring.
Really sisterly and nurturing.
Yeah. And when he went to her apartment and in her room, photos of the 7 of them were everywhere.
Loved that.
And he's like, oh, wait, she's actually a person.
Yeah, she's not just an object of his fantasies.
Yeah.
I thought it was really sad when Oliver said to Meredith, don't kiss James like that again. She was like, is that because of me or because of James? It goes for ages, and there's a line later after Oliver has confessed that it was him, and he's like, well, I guess Meredith got her answer. And it just hurts.
But she got her answer twice, even if she didn't know it the second time, because when Oliver found out that James was dead, he was still in Meredith's house.
Yes.
Pretending to be present with her. But the second she left, he was opening his letter. He was searching on the computer. And I understand that because he has died and he wants some closure and he wants to know the things that he's missed out on. But he's still choosing him.
He'll choose James every time. And I feel so much for Meredith because she was rejected multiple times by Oliver, but still let him back in. Like, the fact that she let him back into her home was just so kind of her. And then he still betrayed her by hiding this stuff from her. Like, Meredith is such a sad character. I feel so sad for her.
Yeah, I don't think it was wrong that he had that interest, but I think the hiding was what made it a bit illicit.
And see, I wonder as well if he actually liked Meredith or if he just got with Meredith because he thought he was supposed to get with Meredith.
I think that's what I was trying to get at before, but not quite finding the right words. Like, it felt like a very insincere thing, which made me feel sad for Oliver that he wasn't, in touch with his own feelings enough to understand what was happening, but also so sad for Meredith because, as it's repeatedly said throughout the book, Oliver's so naive. He can't understand what's going on. And I think everyone, excluding James and Oliver, could see their relationship for what it was. And it made me feel so sad that Meredith was happy to participate in this relationship, even though I think she was smart enough to know that she was just a stopover for him.
Yeah, she knew. And I wonder if it's because Richard was such a prick to her that she was like, well, any gentle love is better than no love at all. And that, what a sad concept.
And also, Oliver was so stupid. They were always telling him he was naive. And in case that wasn't clear because it was written on page, we saw it repeatedly in his actions as well. Like when Richards died, I have this quote here where James says, "Don't be naive, Oliver, for once in your life. He's been dead 2 days and his girlfriend's already in bed with you every night." He shook his head, thoughts tumbling out in a reckless, implacable rush. "People won't like it. They'll talk. They'll gossip. That's what people do." Why are you talking about it like I killed him?
I thought that comment from Alexander was incredible because who would know that they're sleeping in the same bed? If they don't tell anybody, nobody will know. And what is so wrong with Meredith wanting a bit of comfort and company after her abusive boyfriend turned up dead? Something I was wondering about Oliver and Meredith's relationship and also James and Wren's relationship. Like the first hookup was after a big fight, but also like weird vibes between James and Oliver. So I was wondering if both of them were using these other women who they may or may not have had feelings for, but as a way to make a point. James and Oliver had a big fight and then he said, "Wren, come to bed with me." And then Meredith used Oliver, I guess you could say, in the same way. But James and Oliver had some weird vibes that night as well. And he went with her.
Sometimes I forgot that this was set in the late 90s. So there's also the element there where it wasn't quite as, I don't want to say easy, but as common perhaps to be openly gay. And so there's also the aspect there where they have these feelings and they don't know what to do with the feelings. So they just put it on whoever they can. And I think I really liked for James and Oliver where they're acting their final scene and the cops are just off stage and it stops being the tragedy and starts being the romance because they're like in close quarters, they're saying their lines to each other. And the kiss and everyone is surprised. Oh my
beautiful.
God. It
I
was so
loved it.
good. Just like the raw emotion of that, of them both realizing how truly fucked they are. Like they've just realized they're
It's
in
the
love.
end of
They've,
everything.
Yeah, they're in love. They're going to be pulled apart. Someone's going to jail. Like the truth's going to come out. What's going to happen? Who knows? But all we have is this moment right here on stage. Hero and sidekick. Forever.
So beautiful.
It was incredible.
I really felt like I could see it as well. I could see like their faces close to one another and like backlit and little dust specks in the air and like curls of hair and they're sweaty and they're just like looking at each other with like desperation and understanding and sadness.
Yes. Oh, I could picture it in such a like Baz Luhrmann way, like the frenetic editing that he has of like the other actors on stage, like, what the fuck's going on? And the fact that old mate, the movement teacher, is there saying other people's lines to try and keep it moving, and everyone doesn't know what's going on, but they're having this moment. God, it was so great.
And even the way that the police were described, like he could see them at the back with their badges glinting.
Yeah,
like he just pitched that song.
It was so great.
So I think you were saying earlier, though, Bridget, that you didn't know this was going to have a gay romance in it. And I did not know that about this book at all. And when I started pretty early on picking up on the vibes, I was like, oh, hang on a minute. This could be good. This could be exactly what I'm yearning for. And I feel like this is exactly the kind of romance that I enjoy to read where it is, I don't know, I suppose you could say subtle in a way. It's not in your face. It was obvious to me reading that there's something going on. There's a strange energy between these two characters. So I think it's obvious to the reader, but it's not something that they're obviously acting on. And I really felt like the author did a really great job of painting that undercurrent of sexual tension. And one scene in particular that got me feeling all jittery inside was when they were doing Macbeth, and they're in the middle of the play and they both realize that Oliver's meant to be emerging covered in blood. James grabs him by the arm and drags him into a shed. And they're in this cluttered boat shared with oars and life jackets, barely leaving enough space for the two of us to stand face to face. A gallon bucket waited on one low shelf. Jesus, I said, hastily unbuttoning my jacket. How much blood did they think we needed? Loads, apparently, James told me, bending down to wedge the lid off. And it reeks. The sweet, rotten odor filled the room as I wriggled out of my boots. I suppose we have to give them points for authenticity. My arm was tangled in a shirt sleeve. Shit, I'm stuck. Ouch, fuck, James, help. Hush, here. He stood, took my shirt by the hem and yanked it up over my head. My head got caught in the collar and I crashed against him. Can you get blood on those pants, he asked, catching at my waistband to steady me. And just like,
Yeah.
just such close quarters.
The tension of that.
Always touching. And then he grabbed my head, hold still. He smeared the blood around my face and chest and shoulders, raked his fingers through the hair to make it stand on end. There. For a split second, he just stared at me, somehow looking impressed and completely revolted at the same time. How do I look? Fucking incredible, he said, then nudged me towards the door. Now go. And then he's like out running through the pine needles, streaking
incredible.
through the trees. Oh my God.
Yeah,
I was so excited.
That was
then
a
when
scene
he-
where you're
yeah.
like, kiss, 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 kiss,
Yeah.
kiss, kiss, kiss.
But I'm so glad they didn't, because this is a problem that we have
The
with
slow
all of these books.
burn.
Red, White, and Royal Blue. The last one that we did, it was just happened so quickly, and you didn't have any time to want it.
All you do in this is want it.
Yeah,
And like, so when I was reading it last night, I sent this audio message to the group chat because I'd just gotten to the bit where they confirmed that Alex was gay. And it hadn't even like crossed my mind that Alex was gay because I was so busy focused on Oliver and James being gay. But I also think that that was incredible too. So in the start of the book, you're like, okay, well, eventually they're going to admit that Oliver and James are gay. And then when they admit someone's gay, it's not either of them. And you're like, what the fuck? And they actually never admit it until the very, very end. You're stuck with being like, oh, maybe I'm misreading this. No, they're obviously in love. And then like when they're doing Romeo and Juliet and James is playing Romeo in the middle and Oliver's just watching from the wings like, oh my God, he looks incredible. He's the perfect Romeo. There couldn't be anyone better. I'm like, you poor bastard.
Yeah.
You poor bastard. What a difficult situation to be in, to just be openly pining like that and have no way forward.
When James rocks up at Oliver's house and
Oh God.
they're sleeping in the same bed and he's like, why do I feel scoured about this?
Oh my And in the morning, the sisters are like, who's your boyfriend, Oliver? And he's like, I'm James. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
and I don't know, like I don't know if I've read many books where there's such a tragic end like this. But Laura, a few episodes ago, you said that you love it when they don't end up together, and I really loved that they did not get their happy ending. It just made it so devastating.
Oh, it hurts so much.
But there is that note of ambiguity, though, because it does seem to suggest that James might be alive and he might be on their beach.
I have seen some theories
Yeah.
online that say he's not, he's just faked his death.
I love the unknown of it, and I love that we can just draw our own conclusions. I don't ever want the author to confirm it. I don't ever want a sequel. Just let us guess, because part of the tragedy is in the not knowing. Because it could be that he faked his death, but he is dead now. Like, it could be anything. Or he faked his death, but Oliver can't find him. Like, it could be so many things. Maybe Oliver doesn't want to find him anymore. Maybe Meredith finds out and tells him not to. Who knows? And I would rather not know than have the answer.
Absolutely. I think as well it was quite funny because the point that makes Oliver think that maybe James is alive is drawn from this like sentence or this really brief scene, which was actually a part of the book I didn't enjoy because I found that the author had a way of writing these kind of we were the bright young things and completely untouchable kind of quotes here and there. Like, you know, I think there's a scene when they first head down to the lake in the opening of the book, and it's like, we were like a tangle of laughter and limbs, like all the like most attractive people in the school just hanging out. And I found that there were often moments where they were just telling us like what a cool ragtag bunch of crazy misfits they were. And I was like, I would rather, like, I get that. I get that. Like, you don't need to keep saying that. And the line about James and Oliver was sort of a throwaway thing where it was like, oh yeah, we went to this beach, we had a magical summer where we drank wine in the sand, and I was like, oh.
We were naked on the sand and people stole our clothes.
Yeah. And it is a nice memory, but I just, in a way, I'm glad that it circled back, because I thought, like, all right, like, just tell us more about the good times that they had. Like, we get it. They did fun things.
But I'm pretty sure that quote that James wrote in the letter is actually what the piece that Oliver auditions for in the beginning.
It's the first one.
I perceive it that Oliver always felt like no one really cared what roles he played or what he did. He was just there. I think he describes himself as the backup a couple of times with Philippa. But this is James, your leading man, paying close attention to what you were doing and is directly referencing your work and your acting career. And I don't know, that's the kind of like ego stroking that actors would love. And obviously Oliver falls for that. And it is a really nice moment.
Oh, it's really me.
Yeah, it's really nice to know that James not only knew what role he played, but knew the lines that would meet their story where it needed to be met.
I think it was just the perfect ending as well, because there was a quote, it's on page 346, just after Philippa has told Oliver that James is gone. He says, suddenly it seems there is a fourth person in the room. For the first time in 10 years, I look at the chair that had always been Richard's and find it isn't empty. There he sits in lounging leonine arrogance. He watches me with a razor-thin smile, and I realize that this is it. The counterstroke, the end all he was waiting for. He lingers only long enough for me to see the gleam of triumph in his half-lidded eyes. Then he, too, is gone.
I love that because it perfectly ends Richard's storyline, because he, for the rest of the book, is just this like unknown presence, and they're always waiting for that other shoe to drop, and you actually think that he's gone for a while because you don't see him for ages. But then there he is, and you're like, now it's over. Now you can forget about Richard because you're suffering as much as Richard did. The only other thing I think I want to say about Richard is that I thought, and it's a minor criticism, but I thought it was really unclear why he had so much beef that Oliver and James weren't admitting that they loved each other. That was the whole reason he antagonized James. And like, I'm guessing it's, again, just that whirlwind of him not getting the roles he wanted, James getting the roles that he wanted, perhaps Meredith paying a bit more attention to Oliver. But I thought it was a really odd motivation for Richard to start being an asshole to them.
I was just, I think where I landed on that was that I think what happens so much in like films and books is when an actor is playing these emotional roles, they take on parts of the characters that they're playing. And I think that that was mentioned a few times that Oliver was the only one who didn't. And I think that Ren, during the funeral scene, her whole eulogy or speech or whatever was just incredible. But the part that she said, you all know that Richard refuses to be ignored, but maybe every day we let grief in, we'll also let a little bit of it out, and eventually we'll be able to breathe again. And I felt like that was her warning against falling too deep into the Shakespeare characters and how, you know, in Macbeth, just any of the tragedies, I guess, people just let their grief consume them and then they just lose their minds and they go mad. And that was her warning, but yet it happened anyway.
Which is incredible because Ren is really made out to be a hot mess in the end of this book. But if anything, she's the only one actually dealing with her grief.
I agree, yeah.
And she's taking the time and she's not using substances. She's just being really fucking sad. She's taking time away from the school. She's going home. She's centering herself. And she's like the only one who actually makes it out of this okay, even though she's arguably the one worst done by in this whole thing. Not only is her closest thing to a sibling murdered by her friends, but she's then convinced to cover it up and let him die.
And she feels as though she has to give permission to let the others.
Like Ren's tragic in her own way.
And she's referred to constantly as the weak one, the small one. But I feel like she had the most perspective. Like there was one line earlier in that speech at the funeral. She said that, to be perfectly honest with you, sometimes I didn't like him either. Richard wasn't an easy person to like, but he was an easy person to love. And I think that is so sad because even though he was mean and nasty and a bully, that doesn't mean that he didn't have a family and he didn't have a future.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that that was the only side of him, because obviously when Meredith couldn't get Richard to stop being an asshole, Ren was sent in. So obviously Ren knew a side of Richard that no one else knew and no one else saw.
Yeah.
And I guess that's true of anyone that you perceive as a villain. They've always got something else going on or another side to them that we don't actually know about.
To be honest, I was surprised it took them so long to fall apart.
And I know we already talked about it, but I really just loved the way that they weaved in all the like plot points of Shakespearean stories and like all your typical tragedy markers into this. I thought it was so cleverly constructed.
Even just the structure of 5 acts.
Yes, like and like the
small
prologue
things.
And the way the dialogue was laid out, where it just said Meredith, James, Richard.
Oh, I loved that.
Often. And I found it so digestible because there were often so many of them speaking at once, and I found that having it laid out like a play text gave it a lot more rhythm.
And I think the author did a really good job as well of setting up the characters so strongly at the beginning that you didn't need any typical like conversation markers to know how it was all being said, because you had a clear enough grasp of the characters without it. I think the only other character we haven't really talked a lot about is Philippa. I only want to talk about her in the sense that I relate to her because I also was the token female being cast as a male every time.
Me too.
Every time.
Well, I was so Laura and I would always do our assessment together, and Laura would be the wife.
Why did I always get to be the wife?
I think I might be a little bit taller than you.
True.
Yeah. And I think you are probably more of a feminine person anyway. Like,
Ooh la la.
yeah. But yeah, I agree, Erin. Yeah.
When they were talking about it, I was like, Pip, you know me.
All of
You
my
know
costumes are
struggles.
suits.
Yeah. The vest I had to buy, the men's business shirt.
Yep. So many.
Like, oh.
I think the only other thing I have that I want to say is that this is the first podcast book that we've read that I actually wish was longer.
Ooh.
I think if anything, I would have appreciated a little bit more time in the end. I wonder if that would change if I read it again or let myself sit with it for a bit. Because again, even as we've discussed this, I've settled into my opinions a little bit more and like found new things to enjoy about this book. But I did find that the ending was a little bit rushed, the pacing was off, and I wouldn't have minded at all if things were elaborated on a bit more, if we got to sit in confusion and discomfort and grief, and if they unraveled even further. I don't know how further you could have gone, but all I know is I enjoyed that so much, so I wouldn't have minded seeing more of that.
That is true. Yeah. I was thinking that the pacing was good, but now that you've said seeing them unravel it even more, that would have been so interesting. But I feel like the pacing was good because I think if that was happening in real life, it would feel like a whirlwind, and you would just be able to feel like the blood rushing through your ears and not being able to focus on anything.
Yeah,
and going to have to do your job, like perform on the stage when your whole world is falling apart, and it's just a matter of time before everything ends.
I think that's probably right. I really enjoyed the pacing up until that end point. I guess the end point that I mean, the epilogue, yeah. But even that said, did it just feel short or too short because I was shocked and I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening?
No, I agree. I think I really liked the pacing for most of it. I liked the way the acts started and ended because it always felt like every act ended with a lights off moment, like if it was a stage show. And I think I wanted to see Oliver digesting James's death more. I did think it was unfortunate that he found out James was dead, went to Meredith, and then Philippa was like, oh, hey, by the way, I've got letters for you. I felt that was too soon. I wanted to see him mourn his friend and try and figure out what was next, because he said it was pretty plainly that his next step was James. And so the thing he's been aiming for 10 years is no longer there anymore. And I do think it's unfortunate that we didn't see him actually spiral a little bit, trying to come to terms with that, the loss of his goal for 10 years.
I think maybe a trip to the beach to read the letter would have been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a trip to the beach, or like, I don't know, a solitary trip back to the school maybe reading that some of the scenes they did together. I don't know, but something that would bring him closer to James before he got a letter saying, by the way, not dead. Teehee.
I guess, yeah, that would have been really lovely. The only other thing that I think is, in a way as well, though, the heartache and the tragedy of it is that the only time they got to be together or admit that they were in love with one another was that fleeting kiss before everything goes apart. And so, I don't know, even in a way, the fact that they still aren't admitting that, it's still a little bit ambiguous, I think, in a lot of ways. So even that is a good thing.
So it's favourite character time. What are we thinking? Do we have favourites?
I think Richard.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's saucy.
He was such a presence and just a bad guy.
A bad
He
bitch.
was a great villain and victim.
That's a good answer.
They can
I
be
haven't
both.
thought too much about this, but actually I think possibly James as a knee-jerk kind of reaction. I thought he was quite, basic, a bit of a square to begin with, and then as his sort of desperation and like complexity and darkness and all of those things came to the front, I found that he was just such a tragic character, such a tortured poor sod. And I really enjoy that. Love that for him.
I don't know who my favorite might be. I really enjoyed Alexander. I liked watching his descent into something he never thought he would be, I think. He's described as being really strong, and he's the one who makes the really tough call that they should just let Richard go. And I guess he thinks he can handle that, but he can't. And I liked watching him have to come to terms with that and his own, I guess, mortality as a result of that. Like when he had his overdose, that scene was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
I found it really hard to pick a favorite. There were no characters that I particularly disliked and no characters that I liked more than others. Even Oliver, even though he could be a bit of a neckbeard at times, I was I was intrigued by him. I still, think he was kind of unreliable, and I love that about him. Way to go, Oliver.
I think they were all really, even though they were annoying, they were well written, so it was hard to dislike any of them.
Yeah, I don't have a least favorite character.
Except for that mean teacher who was
Gwendolyn.
incredibly inappropriate.
Just
and like
rude lady.
Why were they always putting them in like pajamas and silk robes and stuff? Like someone needs to investigate these teachers.
I agree.
Except for that headmaster who doesn't know a fucking thing about performing arts. And when he's like, oh, look, I don't really know Shakespeare, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah.
What a king. Pop off. It's time. It is time for the most important question. Lit or shit, team?
I'm going to go with lit.
Lit.
The lits have it once again. Hurrah!
We should rename the book If We Were Lit, because by God, were they lit. By God.
And they got hit.
You're right. They talked
Friendship
lit and they
process.
got hit.
Oh my God.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh my God.
No wonder we loved it so
Holy
much.
shit.
That brings us to the end of the episode. Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say goodnight till it be morrow. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you want to be on the same page as us, follow us at talklit.gethit on Instagram and TikTok.